Hello. So we're on chapter 32. 32. I have no idea what we were reading. So let's go share a screen and let's take a look at the last chapter. So some of you may feel like this when you're reading. I have no idea what we were reading. So let's make this big. We're on chapter 32. So let's see. I slipped through a side door in the ladies' parlor. Just outside the parlor was the board where they put up notices. She was making sure remember, she decided that she was going to use those snowshoes and she was going to go into something Ford, Ridgeford, maybe Ridgeford. That's how bad I am. Oh, yep, Ridgeford. So she went to Ridgeford. She went to a tavern. She's going to she asked to sleep next to the stove in the kitchen. But she looked at the notices board. She didn't see, anything about her, which was good. Let's see. Read the notices twice. My name was not there. I felt better. I felt almost calm. Okay, so she needs some supplies. That's why she decided she was going to walk all the way to Ridgeford. And I think I ended the last video worried that that guy, can't remember his name either, that he's gonna show up, right? The creepy guy, the guy that tried to basically kind of molest her and that had gotten caught in his own trap and kind of took advantage of her and the food that Sam Goshen, this is his name. I'm worried that he's going to show up and he's going to be there when she gets back. Okay, here we go. When I showed Mrs. Thorpe the cook that I could bake good bread, she took me on as a helper. Sometimes I had to carry trays into the tavern and set them on the serving table. I always hurried in and out and never looked at anyone or spoke. I worked 6 days. With the shillings I earned, I went across the street to Morton and Son's store. Young Mr. Morton waited on me. I thought he would recognize me, but he didn't seem to, and I acted as if I hadn't seen him peering at me over the pile of boxes the first time I'd visited the store. I bought gunpowder and shot, a jug of molasses, salt, and a package of tea. I would have bought more, but I lacked the money. When I asked for the tea, Mr. Morton set out 3 boxes. Just today, we had a shipment from New York, he said. It's the first in a long time. Now that the British are winning the war, we'll have tea regularly. What kind does thee wish? We have 3 brands, all from Ceylon. I'm not sure if that's Ceylon. And I don't know where that is. Maybe Britain somewhere. I chose the least expensive, and after he had wrapped it up and taken my money, he walked to the door with me. He held out his hand to say goodbye. It was pale like his face. He had blue eyes and lanky, hay-colored hair, which he wore tied in a string knot. I still was sure that he hadn't recognized me. What is thy name? He asked. Sarah Bishop, I nearly blurted out. Then I caught myself in time and said, Travers, Amy Travers. Amy was my cousin in Midhurst, England. Ah, so she's lying about her name. Pretty name, he said. Thee was in the store last year late. Thee bought an axe, powder and ball, flour and salt. Thee wanted 3 or 4 blankets, but had money only for 2. You have a good memory, I said, but you forgot that I bought sweetening too. Mrs. Morton smiled a little, then he was serious again. Thee may think me rude, he said, but I am not. There was a notice in the tavern. It was there before Christmas. It was signed by Captain Cunningham and offered a reward for the return of a girl named Sarah Bishop, accused of starting a fire in New York City. It had a description of the girl, as I remember. It said she was tall, yet slight of build, and had blue eyes and freckles. Mr. Morton looked at me as if he was certain that I was Sarah Bishop, as if all he need do was to march me down to the constable and collect Captain Cunningham's reward. I thought to flee out the door, but he was standing against it. I don't know, he said, whether thee is Sarah Bishop or not, though I am certain that if thee is not, then thee has a sister and her name is Sarah Bishop. Uh-oh. He smiled in a superior way at what he must have felt was a joke. But this is of little consequence, he said. What I wish to say is that I remembered thee from the time thee first visited the store, and being most disturbed that thee was the Sarah Bishop responsible for the fire, I went to the tavern the next day after I saw the notice and took it down and destroyed it. Wow, he did. Thank you, I managed to stammer. That was kind. He was looking at the musket I had under my arm. Okay, we got to go to the other one. Here we go. Uh-oh, what happened to me? There we are. Okay, here we go. I brought this up so I could continue. Why does thee carry that around with thee? He said. I knew well why I carried the musket, but I did not tell him. He opened the door, chill air rushed in, and he closed the door and stood with his back against it. My father waited on thee, young Mr. Morton said. I heard thee tell him that thee wasn't settling around here, but going northward. Yes, something like that. He was looking close at me, yet not unfriendly. I take it thee never went. What business is it of yours? I had a mind to say, but I said nothing and edged toward the door. And how do you know that I didn't go north? I thought. Sam Goshen was in here a week ago to sell furs, Mr. Morton said. He told us that there was a girl living up on Long Pond and described thee. I decided that thee must be the girl he was talking about. It made me uneasy when he brought all this up. I have a way to go, I said. I'd better start. Young Mr. Morton put out a hand to hold me back. My great grandfather, he said, was banished from Massachusetts colony because he broke the law by appearing in the street without a musket. But there's no law now that compels thee to carry one. What is thee afraid of? Most things, I said, and all people. Fear is something that encourages people to harm thee. Fear causes hatred. You sound like a Quaker, I said. I am a Quaker, he replied. My grandmother was a Quaker. Mr. Morton was dressed in a plain dark brown jacket and plain trousers bound at the knee. He wore a black hat with a wide brim that turned up at the sides and had ear flaps. He looked like a Quaker. My father had always disliked the Quakers, their these and thys and somber clothes. He couldn't stand the silence of their prideful ways. Is that why you are not off to war? I asked him, thinking of Chad. Because you are one. Because you are one? For that reason, Mr. Morton said. He opened the door. Out of a gray sky, it was beginning to snow. Thee'd best not go now, he said. We can put thee up here for the night. My mother can. I gathered up my purchases. We have meetings, he said. I wish thee would visit when things are again quiet. We have them every fourth Sunday. Thee would be most welcome to come. Sometime, I said, although I had no thought of ever going to a Quaker meeting. My father in his grave would open his eyes and look at me in dismay. Mr. Morton glanced out at the falling snow, then closed the door and once more stood against it as if to bar my way. On sober thought, he said, I think it foolish of thee to depart in this storm. Though the British are at hand, I can hide thee until the storm is over. I have hidden the persecuted before. Thank you kindly, I said, but I must go. Mr. Morton took off his black hat with the flat crown and the flaps that looked like wings of a tired seagull. Then he put it on again and at a straighter angle. That was another habit that my father disliked, the business of wearing a hat at all times, even indoors. Suddenly he asked, does thee live alone? Yes. It is not good for a young girl to live that way. It is because the British hound thee. Is it because the British hound thee? Partly. Why else? Because I like to. Mr. Morton seemed puzzled. Has thee no family? None. They are dead. Thee is an orphan, then? Having answered his question, I said nothing. He stared hard at the ceiling. Perhaps he was staring at heaven. When the British leave, he said, as leave they will, thee must come to Ridgeford. I shall find thee a proper place to live and gainful employment. Thee cannot live alone in the wilderness. What if thee was to injure thyself or fall ill of some disease? Who would know? Who would help thee? Who would care for thee? No one, I said. I can make do. I thanked Mr. Morton for his kindness and slipped past. After I had crossed the street, I glanced back. He was still standing in the doorway, looking at me through the falling snow. I'm thinking maybe he was flirting and he likes her. And who knows? Maybe they'll get together in the future. I have no idea. But I thought it was nice that he offered her a job and to find her help her find a place to live. Okay, here we go. Chapter 33. I went back to the tavern to stay until the snow ended, but soon afterward, 5 of the king's dragoons rode into the courtyard and stabled their horses. It had stopped snowing, and I saw the men from the kitchen window. Mrs. Thorpe wanted me to carry out food to them, but I stole away while they were eating their breakfast. On my way to Ridgeford, I had made slash marks with my knife on some of the trees I'd passed, high enough on the trunks not to be hidden by fallen snow and close enough together so that I would not stray off. I had no trouble finding the marks on my journey home, but I was nearly frozen when I got there. I used some of the gunpowder to start a fire and sat beside it for hours until I thawed out. Months before, when I had heard the bear snuffling around outside, he was digging up the fish I had put in the snowbake. I found this out when I went to get one for supper, and all of them were gone. Of course, they're going to The bears are going to take your fish. I said that chapters ago. I cut holes in the ice, set 3 lines, and caught another batch of trout and bass. This time I smoked them the way the long knives had, over a hickory wood fire, and slowly. Some I saved for the muskrat, who liked fresh trout, though he would eat them when they were frozen. I didn't need to worry about Gabriel. He still clung up upside down, never uttering a sound, happily asleep in his dark corner. Spring came overnight, it seemed. The lake groaned and boomed, and then the ice broke up into floes that mild winds moved around. The maples came first, the young leaves red in the sunlight, then the pink leaves of the oaks. Dogwood flowered everywhere, and along the stream there were big swatches of blueberry buds. Blue herons fished the shallows, and then a torrent of brown hawks flowed down from the east, flying low over the lake and silently disappearing. Geese came out of the north in dozens of glistening wedges. Gabriel began his nightly wanderings. The muskrat grew restless and wandered around the cave, making curious noises. But if I took him outside, he would come limping back before long, looking hurt, as if he had wanted to get rid of him. As if I had wanted to get rid of him. At last, I took him to the lake, waded out, and let him loose. He followed me ashore and back to the cave. I took him to the lake once more. This time, he turned over on his back, gave me a sidelong glance, flapped his fat tail, and was gone. He left behind only the strong smell of musk and a string of silvery bubbles. I had mixed feelings as he swam away. I knew better, but still I felt deserted. I saw him again a few days later when I was out fishing on the shore. He came swimming along, only his head showing, with another muskrat trailing behind him. The pair cavorted around for a while and spoiled the fishing. Later, late in the spring, I saw them again. This time, they had 2 glossy young muskrats in tow. Staunchly, Gabriel stayed by me. He went off in his nightly wanderings and came back promptly at dawn, hung upside down in his corner, and from time to time during the day gave out his timid squeals. Sometimes before he flew off at dusk, I played the broom game with him. He was much more human than our neighbor, the muskrat. The long knives came early in June. Their baby had died during the winter. Oh no, but the little girl was healthy and had grown tall. Just so you're aware, a lot of children died in years past, a lot, and people just got used to it. They brought news that the British still held New York, which meant that Captain Cunningham was sitting behind his desk in the big gray building. We pushed the dugout down the grassy slope and slid into the lake. How cool. To my surprise, and I think to Long Knives, it didn't swamp or turn turtle, but turn turtle means to turn over, but floated on an even keel. John Longknife had promised to help me make a birch canoe someday. It will be much lighter than the dugout, his wife said. You can carry a birch canoe on your back. Then you can travel from lake to lake and stream to stream. The dugout is all I'll need, I wanted to say, but didn't because it would seem impolite. The Long Knives fished for 5 days, and I fished with them. We smoked our trout together, enough to last well into the coming winter, which we were thinking about already. We hunted together, geese for tallow, using reed traps to save powder, and deer meat to smoke. One evening, when we came in from the lake, we found tracks beside the stream where the bear had been fishing. It was the same animal that had stolen my cache of fish from the snowbank, judging from the way one of its front paws slanted out. I didn't mind the fish so much as I feared happening upon him sometime when I was alone. Should we track him down? I said bravely, braver than I felt. John Longknife shook his head. 1 bullet, no good. 2 bullets, no good. 3 bullets may be good. He turned to his wife and spoke in their language. My husband says, she explained, that the bear moves quick and you can kill him only in a certain place. If you miss that place, you will have no time to reload your musket again. He will jump on you and claw you dead. At that moment, I gave up the idea of shooting the bear with the paw that slanted out, the bear that stole my fish. The Indians stayed for most of a week. Helen showed me how to brew tea from black birch leaves and bark. She also pointed out a hollow tree on the ridge near the big rock that looked like a castle, where there were 2 swarms of bees. In another month, I could rob their hives, she told me, but don't take all the honey, take only half. The bees need the rest to eat during the winter. Since they were on their way to Ridgeford to purchase supplies, I asked the Longknives if they would take along a packet of deer meat and give it to young Mr. Morton. She likes Mr. Morton too. Whenever I thought of him, I felt sorry that he looked so thin and gaunt, as if he needed a good meal, one like I used to cook at home when we were all together. The long knives glanced at each other and smiled when I mentioned his name, which embarrassed me. I explained that I had barely met Mr. Morton and felt sorry for him because he was so sickly looking. His father owns a store where you can buy all sorts of food, I explained, and yet he always looks hungry as if he never ate a mouthful. He eats, Helen Longknife said, but he has a fire inside. In in trouble much, Longknife added, this man. They had him in the jail, Helen said. It was because of the war. He would not go and they put him in jail. Then he got in arguments with his father. His father owns two Negro slave women and won't give them up. They got they got to fighting because he wouldn't, and Isaac Morton was put in jail again. Oh dear. In jail, much this man, her husband said, all the time in jail. I was not astounded to learn that Isaac Morton was in jail much of his time, nor that he had a fire inside of him, as Helen Longknife had said. I saw all of it in his eyes when he was talking to me, smoldering there quietly. Helen asked, shall I say something to Mr. Morton? Do you want to send some words? Nothing, I said. Then I changed my mind. Tell him he's too skinny. He needs to eat more. Helen was disappointed. Is that all you're saying? Even that is too much, I thought. Why should I bother with whether he was skinny or not? Why should I be giving him advice? Don't say anything, I said. Just give Mr. Morton the venison. He should know what to do with it. The long knives left in a thunderstorm, weighed down with pelts they had taken that winter. They planned to drop by on their way home as they cached the fish they had smoked. Okay, that's confusing. The long knives left in a thunderstorm, weighed down with pelts they had taken that winter. They stayed till winter? They planned to drop by on their way home, so they cached the fish they had smoked. When they got to the far side of the lake and stood on the big rock, they stopped and waved. I had a tight feeling in my throat as I waved back. I was surprised that I was sorry to see them go. Oh, she misses the company. Okay, I'm gonna stop share. So as I predicted, she likes that guy, Mr. Morton Jr., right? And we got to find out why he was sickly, and we got to find out that he's a good guy, that his dad has slaves and he doesn't approve. So that's kind of cool. Okay, I'm gonna stop recording.